Nisbet and Cohen's work investigates white men in the American South with a unique cultural heritage. While women were not the target of their hypothesizing, they do note that women demonstrated many of the same attitudes about honor as Southern men, but in supportive roles. We're going to look deeper into women's roles in honor cultures, in particular, the differing norms and traditions that allow women to avoid dishonor in their communities. We'll see that these honor norms and traditions tend to be highly gendered, meaning there are honor norms for women's behavior that might be totally different and inapplicable for men. For women, honor norms give information about what is respectable behavior as a woman and emphasize women in their traditional roles as caregivers for home and family. They emphasize passivity and deference in some cases. For men, norms and traditions that are less likely to overlap with women's are those that emphasize strength and power and skill and leadership in public life. These norms have many exceptions, as what is central in honor cultures is not as much what women do exactly, but the extent to which the behavior is supportive and complementary to men's pursuits. In some honor cultures, women's supportive role might mean taking on men's duties when they're out of the home, raiding other settlements for resources. It might also mean reinforcing masculinity norms about aggression by cheering on fights and competitions. In Montenegro, for example, the traditional honor culture there emphasizes hard work, and hard work is what makes a good woman. This is because hard physical labor that was typically carried out by men at home had to be carried out by women in the community when men were away or were killed in the course of these long blood feuds that occurred over honor. Anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist Christopher Bohm provides a really interesting account of the day-to-day life and constant conflict in Montenegrin honor culture in the book Blood Revenge. It's worth checking out. At this point, you might be thinking, do these gendered norms still persist? As you know, the concept of gender is actively being questioned and reconstructed by both scholars and in public discourse. But do people still evaluate what is right and wrong, or believed to be right and wrong, and honorable and dishonorable, differently for men and women still? I'll show you some statistics that shed light on these questions from recent polling of Americans using online studies with Amazon Turk. In these studies, together with Dr. Fiery Cushman, I actually surveyed people to understand whether they still conceptualize honor and perceive it as rooted in those same traditional norms. So we asked U.S. participants, for men in particular, what brings the most dishonor? And for women in particular, what brings the most dishonor? And they filled in their response using a few words or a sentence in a text box. And these responses were then qualitatively coded for their conceptual similarity in a number of categories, which emerged pretty easily and naturally. The results indicated that when we asked participants, for women in particular, what brings the most dishonor, people were most likely to name transgressions related to sexual behavior. 50% of all responses were references to promiscuity or infidelity. And that's in red there on the pie chart. Other modes of dishonor for women included failing as a mother or at work in green. Typically, failing the family was noted. And the third most popular response involved some form of being a victim. The dishonor of being a rape victim or a victim of domestic abuse, for example. And this is in the orange slice there. So we're interested in how different responses might be when people are asked about men. So here you can see the pie chart for the question for men in particular, what brings the most dishonor, and how those panned out. So we found that people were most likely to name transgressions related to failing to provide for one's family or failing at work when asked about men's dishonor. So about 38%, the green slice. Proposing that the most dishonorable thing for men involved sexual behavior was much, much rarer, only 11% of the time, compared to women, where that was the most popular answer. Checking out the largest segment for men in green and the second largest one in blue, these two most important sources of dishonor that people perceive for men are failing your family and workplace and committing various harmful and deceitful immoral acts. These comprise together 70% of responses about men's dishonor. For women, they only comprise about 27% of responses. These results lead to the question, what are the consequences for women when their honor is perceived as so much more closely connected to their sexual behavior rather than their moral behavior, their harmful behavior? The South is argued to be a culture of honor to this day. So do gendered norms of passivity and deference for women and violence and aggression for men persist in the South? One piece of data that suggests that they do is the difference in rates that women are killed by men, which is a typical measure of domestic-related violence, across the nation. The colors from light blue to darker magenta indicate increasing incidence of killing per 100,000 females. The darker magenta is concentrated in the southern states, indicating that southern women are more likely to be killed by intimate partner violence. Perhaps this could be explained by overall increases in violence among men or the accessibility of firearms, but that wouldn't explain why other data consistently show a comparably low rate of homicide by women. Nisbet and Cohen proposed that the scripts or honor codes for men and women might be different because of how they're institutionalized. Gendered behavioral scripts dictate the implicit rules about right and wrong, which we acquire by absorbing. For example, the gendered script involved scripts about dating, the institution of marriage, religious institutions' rights, judicial institutions' rules about punishments and privileges that vary across crimes that typically happen to women or to men. Ultimately, Nisbet and Cohen argue that honor codes are shaped and are revisable within the institutions that we belong to and participate in. Anthony Atbier's book, The Honor Code, gives several examples of how honor codes are both shaped by and shape our institutions, and how people can change honor codes from the inside of these institutions. Here is Atbier receiving the National Arts and Humanities Medal in 2011. In the Honor Code, his thesis is that honor codes powerfully influence moral behavior, and when they harm individuals, they must be changed. Interestingly, he doesn't claim that we should eliminate honor or honor codes or honor traditions. Instead, he argues that harm can be reduced by shifting the collective viewpoint on what is honorable, and thereby changing honor norms. Atbier describes the gendered role of honor norms in the chapter Wars Against Women, Honor Codes and Sexuality. As we'll see, he shows that a change in what is viewed as honorable for women changes the treatment of women who have been victimized by sexual assault at the institutional level. Atbier provides a really complete explanation of the double standard of dishonor for men and women, which has the following features regarding sexual behavior. First, it's presumed that it's a man's right to ask a woman for access to sex. 2, it's presumed that it's a woman's duty to refuse access to sex. 3, it's presumed that a woman, quote, giving in or allowing access and being found out publicly, this makes her a dishonorable woman. 4, in this case, the man is not made a dishonorable man. However, the dishonor attaches to the woman alone. Appier's observations about the sexual double standard give us some background for how it is that some women were and continue to be blamed or treated with suspicion in cases of sexual assault.